Vital villages, thriving towns. Vital villages, thriving towns. Introduction. In the previous chapters you have seen how the early kingdoms formed and changed into Mahajanapadas. With the passage of time, many kingdoms were established in the subcontinent. The smallest unit of the kingdom was the village. The village, which was the main source of revenue for the king, had a different kind of economic and social setup. In this chapter, you will learn about the social and the economic life of villages. Iron Age, a new phase in agriculture. In the 5th chapter, you have read about the Vedic Age. Man's major achievement during the Vedic Age was discovery of iron. Agriculture built the ground for settled life, and the use of iron brought many changes in agriculture. Some of the largest collections of iron tools and weapons were found in the megalithic burials. Around 2,500 years ago, there is evidence of the growing use of iron tools. These included axes for clearing forests and the iron plowshare. As we had seen, the plowshare was useful for increasing agricultural production. Another step to increase production was irrigation. While new tools and the system of transplantation increased production, irrigation helped the diversification of agriculture. Irrigation works that were built during this time included canals, wells, tanks, and artificial lakes. Who lived in the villages? The village and society setup was different in the northern and southern India. There were at least 3 different kinds of people living in most villages in the southern and northern parts of the subcontinent. In the Tamil region, the society was divided into Vellalar, Uzhavar, and Kadaisir. Large landowners of the region were known as Vellalar. They were the nobility, aristocracy of the ancient Tamil order and had close relations with the different royal dynasties. Uzhavar were the ordinary cultivators or the common peasants who worked on their small farms or for the Vellalars. And the landless people of South India who used to work for Uzhavars and Vellalars were known as Kadaisir. In the northern part of the country, the village headman was known as the Grama Bhojaka. Usually men from the same family held the position for generations. In other words, the post was hereditary. The Grama Bhojaka was often the largest landowner. Generally, he had slaves and hired workers to cultivate the land. Besides, as he was powerful, the king often used him to collect taxes from the village. He also functioned as a judge and sometimes as a policeman. Apart from the Grama Bhojaka, there were other independent farmers known as Grihapatis, most of whom were smaller landowners. And then there were men and women such as the Dasakarmakara, who did not own land and had to earn a living working on the fields owned by others. In most villages there were also some craftspersons, such as the blacksmith, potter, carpenter, and weaver. Finding out about cities. Sources. There are different sources which reveal information about the occupational structure, trade, and socio-economic life of the people of ancient period. You might have heard of Jatakas. Jatakas are the stories among the earliest Buddhist literature, with their average contents around the 4th century BCE. These tales have been preserved by the Buddhist monks and are an important source of history. Other evidences such as sculptures, walls, ceilings, etc. have also been found. Sculptors carved scenes depicting people living in towns and villages as well as in forests. Many of these sculptures were used to decorate railings, pillars, and gateway of buildings. This is a sculpture showing a scene from Prince Siddhartha leaving the nuptial bed and then his family home on a horse. Sanchi sculpture, which is one of the most famous sculptures of India, depicts the scene of Buddha's life and some events from Ashoka's life. Another way of finding out about early villages and town life is the accounts of sailors and travelers who visited these. Fa Hien was a Chinese pilgrim who visited India in 405 AD during the reign of Chandragupta II. He came to India in search of Buddhist manuscripts and left a detailed account of the political, economic, social and religious life of the people during Gupta period. Another traveler, Megasthenes, who was the ambassador of Seleucus in the court of Chandragupta Maurya for 5 years, also gave an account of the life and society at Pataliputra and the Mauryan Empire in his book Indica. Arthashastra, written by Chanakya, is another important source of information about Mauryans and their rule. Coins are also an important source. Archaeologists have found several thousands of coins belonging to this period. These coins inform us about the period, the age, and the chronological order of the rulers. The first documented coin is deemed to start with punch-marked coin issued between the 7th and 6th century BC. These coins are called punch-marked because of their manufacturing techniques. Most of these were made up of silver or copper. These coins were initially issued by merchant guilds and later by rulers. Cities with many functions. Mathura. Mathura is a city in the North Indian state of Uttar Pradesh. It is the administrative center of Mathura district of Uttar Pradesh. During the ancient period, Mathura was an economic hub, located at the junction of important caravan routes. According to the Archaeological Survey of India, the city is mentioned in the oldest Vedic epic, the Ramayana. In the 6th century BCE, Mathura became the capital of the Surasena Mahajanapada. This city was ruled by the Mauryan Empire from the 4th to 2nd century BC and the Sangha dynasty from the 2nd century BC. It may have come under the control of Indo-Greeks between 180 BC and 100 BC. The ancient times Mathura was regarded as an important city because it was located at the crossroads of two major routes of travel and trade, from the northwest to the east and from the north to south. There were fortifications around the city and several shrines. Farmers and herders from adjoining areas provided food for people in the city. Mathura was also a center where some extremely fine sculptures were produced. The wonderful carvings and sculptures of this period are referred to as the Mathura School of Art. The Mathura School of Art flourished under the Kushanas, who were great patrons of art and rulers over the northern India from a period of 1st to 2nd century AD. Mathura was also a religious center. There were Buddhist monasteries, Jaina shrines, and also an important center for the worship of Krishna. Archaeological evidence indicates that by 100 BC, there was a group of Jains living in Mathura. Several inscriptions on surfaces such as stone slabs and statues have been found in Mathura. These inscriptions were made by kings and queens officers, merchants, and craftspersons who lived in the city. For instance, inscriptions from Mathura mention goldsmiths, blacksmiths, weavers, basket makers, garland makers, and perfumers. Megasthenes writes in the 3rd century BC, mentions Mathura as a great city. He described Mathura as a place of great regional importance and suggested that it was, as now, a center of Krishna worship. The traveler Fahayan mentions the city as center of Buddhism around 400 AD. Craft and craftspersons. Archaeologists also found evidence of crafts. The most important of all is northern black polished ware, which included extremely fine pottery. It got its name from the fact that it is generally found in the northern part of the subcontinent. Major features of these wares are: it has been found almost at 1,500 sites, stretching from Takshala in the northwest to Amaravati in Andhra Pradesh, and from Prabhaspatan in Gujarat to Tamuluk in Bengal, showing the trade and commerce relation of different regions. It is usually black in color and has a fine sheen. It is made of well-levigated clay with little tempering material and has a strikingly lustrous surface. The texts reveal that the manufacture of cloth was important. There were famous centers such as Varanasi in the north and Madurai in the south. Both men and women worked in these centers. Many craftspersons and merchants had formed associations known as shrenis. These shrenis of craftspersons provided training, procured raw material, and distributed the finished product. Then, shrenis of merchants organized the trade. Shreni also served as banks where rich men and women deposited money. The money was invested and part of the interest was returned or used to support religious institutions such as monasteries. Accounts also indicate that members of one family could belong to different shrenis. To be closer to their work, shrenis of forester lived near forests. Shrenis of blacksmiths, carpenters, potters and weavers would live outside a city's wall in occupational village. Let's peep into one of such villages, Arikamedu. A closer look, Arikamedu. Arikamedu, the ancient Roman trade center, is located south of Puducherry on the bank of Ariyankupam River. Between 2200 and 1900 years ago, Arikamedu was a coastal settlement where ships unloaded goods from distant lands. Arikamedu has a long history that dates back to the 2nd century BC. The port town was inhabited by Romans, Cholas, and French, who left their mark on this wonderful place. Arikamedu, a fishing colony, was used as a port for trade with the Romans and Greco-Romans. An ancient Chola coin dating back to 1 BC suggests involvement of Cholas in various port-related activities. Besides maritime commerce, there seems to be evidence of inland trade with other megalithic sites. Later the site was divided into 2 sectors, northern and southern, as they were perceived to have been inhabited by different ethnic groups. It is also known as Yavanas in Tamil literature. A massive brick structure, which may have been a warehouse, was found at the site. Other finds include pottery from the Mediterranean region and stamped red-glazed pottery known as Eretine ware, which was named after the city in Italy. There was yet another kind of pottery which was made locally. Though Roman designs were used, Roman lamps, glassware, and gems have also been found at this site. Small tanks have been found that were probably dyeing vats used to dye cloth. There is plenty of evidence for the making of beads from semi-precious stones and glass. Evidences suggest that the exports must have included textile, beads, semi-precious gems, glass, and shell bangles as wastage at the manufacturing site. Even today, if one looks carefully after heavy rains, one can find beads on the banks of the river.